In this leadership series, the Hangar Z Podcast meets with LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell to explore his law enforcement journey, leadership insights, and the power of community-focused policing.
Leadership is really, whatever opportunity you're given to do the little things which add up to the big things. You may have something, come your way that is highly publicized and you're recognized for leadership in some circumstance. But leadership is the day-to-day, is dealing with the people. It's a people business. Dealing with people in a way that's respectful, that's motivational, that's respectful of who they are and what they bring to the table, and to show gratitude to them for what they do.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. John Gray and I are really fortunate to have so many great guests join us on the podcast. That trend continues today, but with a unique twist to it. At the time of the recording, our guest was retired after 40 plus years in law enforcement. Most of that experience was in leadership positions. We also knew that day that our guest had put his hat in the ring for a very important law enforcement chief position. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass recently announced that Jim McDonnell was the 59th Chief of Police for the LAPD. The Hangar Z would like to congratulate Chief Jim McDonnell. We are thrilled to have him on the podcast. Thank you to our sponsors, Airbus, Canyon Aero Connect, and Precision Aviation Group.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Schonely. With me today is the creator of the Hangar Z Podcast, John Gray. John, good day to you.
Good day, sir. Good to see you.
How's everything going?
Excellent. Yeah,
good.
I'm really excited for today's conversation. We've been on a roll with these conversations. I think some of our most favorite topics, mental health and leadership, we've been able to discuss. And
no doubt,
leadership is one of those things today that I'm wildly excited to talk about and hear from someone who has a lot of experience in leadership positions and in forming the culture of law enforcement in Southern California.
He sure does. John and I talked about doing a podcast with a leadership perspective, not mid-level, but a top of the line, top executive office, chiefs, sheriffs, and how they look at law enforcement, aviation, and leadership within both aviation and police work in general. And I said, I know a guy, and I am thrilled that Jim McDonnell is here with us today. Jim, welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast.
Thank you, Jack and John. Thanks for having me on. I've listened to your podcast, and they're always entertaining and very informative, and I'm honored to be a part of it now.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks. We're honored to have you. Truly are. And giving us some time to talk about important topics. I mean, they're important all the time, but probably in 2024, some of these topics we're going to talk about are even more important, especially in the leadership side of things. But before we get to all that, we want our audience to learn about you, learn a little bit about you. And I'm going to learn some things too, as John will. So let's start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up at, Jim?
Yeah, I grew up in Boston, right down the street from Fenway Park. My parents came to this country as immigrants from Ireland a year before I was born. And they had a sponsor, my mother's brother, in Boston. And that's kind of how things were done then. So they took a ship over, and the SS United States landed in New York, found their way to Boston. And my dad was a laborer growing up. My mother cleaned houses and raised a family. I look back and I just feel we were very blessed. We didn't have a lot as far as material things, but we had a family, a loving family, one that cared, one that was looking toward the future, stressed the right things in life, values that we hold dear, as well as the importance of education, the importance of treating people well with respect. And I look back on that often and realize that I never thanked them enough for what they gave me for tools. And now they're gone, and hopefully watching out for us every day from high ground. But I look back and I don't think I could have thanked them enough for what they gave me.
The core values are so important. We can all attest to that, and that's amazing. That's a great story.
A little more just on the Boston at the time.
Yeah.
It's a great city, a city passionate about sports, passionate about a number of different things. But I looking back on it, and at the time, the issues of the day, when I went to high school, forced busing was something that was in play, and it was very, very difficult to get an education in Boston at the time. I was fortunate. I worked every chance I got to raise enough money to be able to pay tuition, and went to a Catholic high school in the combat zone, coincidentally in Boston, and got a great education there, and then went on from there to college. But a lot of people were not so fortunate that during that period, it was very, very difficult times. And, those who made it through it and were successful, I take my hat off to them, because, particularly those who didn't have the opportunity to go to a Catholic school or a private school, it was tough times.
Yeah.
But then moving on, went to Don Bosco High School in Boston. I remember my senior year in high school, I was destined in my mind to be an architect. And I was sitting at a drafting table, kind of looking out the window, thinking to myself at 17 years of age, can I do this 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the rest of my life? And you got a lot of energy at 17, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I can. So I thought to myself, what can I do where every day will be different? Every day will be a challenge. Every day I'll meet new people. And at the end of the day, maybe I can look back and say, you know what, I was able to help someone else today. And the only thing in my limited experience, and background at the time that you could do that was policing if you did it right. Yeah. And I thought, you know what, it's not done right a lot of times, sadly, but for those who do it right, it is a noble calling and a special group of people who take it seriously and dedicate their lives to that. So I changed my trajectory. I went to college, majored in criminal justice, St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire, great school. And when I left there, I had set up an internship my senior year in college with the Boston Police Department in District 4 in the south end of Boston. And that was a great experience. I got to meet a lot of people, and in Boston, you need to know people to get on the job, and or at least back in that day. And so I felt I had made the connections I needed to make, and had at least familiarized myself with that department. Got to work with some great people. I was assigned to the Neighborhood Responsive Policing Program, which I didn't know what that was. And then looking back on it now, it was the precursor to community policing. And little did I know the value of what that would hold for me long term. I was assigned to two lieutenants, Al Sweeney and Bill Bratton. And
familiar name?
Yeah, how small the world is.
Yeah, kind of small.
Over the course of years, we would stay in touch, ultimately compete for the chief's job in LA. He got it, made me his number 2. And we had 7.5 great years together at LAPD. And I just look, and the people that I have had the privilege of knowing and working with over the years are probably some of the most valuable parts of the takeaway I have for my life. Looking back and just thinking the opportunities that were there, you had to fight for them. Nothing comes easy. And a lot of times I was not successful, but I didn't give up. I kept coming back and hitting it harder the next time. And in the academy, they tell you never give up. And if you internalize that and use that in all aspects of your life, you can do it in a way that's respectful. Because I think first take on that term is not that way. But if you just tell yourself, if you want something, you keep working at it, you're going to get it. And I found that in my own career. And, there were a number of times where I could have said, okay, I give it a shot. That's good. I'm done. And I didn't do that. And I think that was going back again to my upbringing, my parents, my brother and sister, all of the friends that I have. That was kind of one of the values that was very important to everybody. Fight for what you want and don't ever give up.
So let me take you back to the 17-year-old Jim, when you're thinking about that architect thing. and you're going, nah, I need to look at something else. Was there another influence? I mean, was there a relative? Was there a TV show? What's triggered the law enforcement angle? Because there's a lot of other things you could have done, but you started thinking law enforcement instead of the architect. What else was there that drew you there?
We had some family friends who were in policing. I didn't have any relatives other than one cousin in Ireland who was in the Garda over there.
Yeah,
but we didn't have much in the way of contact at that time. It wasn't a family type thing like it so often is, that you have a father or brother or an uncle in the profession. It was more, I think, just based on my own limited experience and watching what happens in the street and watching what people need and how much people value good law enforcement, respectful, constitutional law enforcement, and how it can make such a difference in people's lives, and particularly in more challenging areas where if you don't have the police, they're at the the behest then of the local street gang or the local crew or mob or whatever it is in the particular area. And that's no way to live. And police are the constant that at least maintains a lid on some of the things that are going on. There is some level of accountability within the community if the police are able to do their job the way that it was intended to be done. It's just such a critical piece of American society that if you appropriately resource and deploy a police department, provide the right leadership, you have one of the main pillars of foundational success for that society. If you don't have that, I think job one of any society is ensuring the safety of its citizens. Yeah. And if you don't have that, then you everything else deteriorates from there. And so I kind of looked at those things and probably, more on a surface level, and sure shaped, I'd say, by certainly by TV and movies and pop media, pop culture at the time. And this is back in the 60s and 70s. And I'm a kid sitting in Boston there, and, to think that watching Adam 12 or Dragnet or Police Story or Policewoman or the multitude of shows that were all focused on LAPD, to think that would have such an influence on me beyond entertainment, but actually shaping what would become my future. I never anticipated I would find myself in Los Angeles. My worldview was pretty small. As a kid growing up, we didn't have a car most of the time. We took public transportation, and so we didn't get to travel a whole lot. So I anticipated I would grow up, and if I became a police officer, would be in Boston or the Boston area.
Right. When
it came time and I graduated, Proposition 2.5, which in Massachusetts was a tax cutting measure, that ultimately there was layoffs of the Boston Police Department at the tone of about 25%. Wow. So they were not hiring anybody new for years to come. And so when I looked at that, that's back when we wrote letters, I wrote letters to police departments all over the country to try and find out more information, see where the reputation was good, where there were opportunities, where they were hiring. And there were a number of places around the country that I looked at. But I looked at LAPD and thought, you know what, that is kind of the pinnacle of policing, at least in my mind at the time. And although I will probably never have the opportunity to get on there, because primarily I don't know anyone, if I don't at least try, I'll be kicking myself for the rest of my life for maybe what could have been.
Right.
So I gave it everything I had. I came out for a week, did the out-of-towner testing, slept on a guy's floor, a friend of a friend, and ended up doing the testing every day for a week. And then you go home. I finished school, graduated, got a letter from the department, a form letter that basically said you did well on the testing. You need to come out and take the remainder of it, which was the background investigation and the psychological with the psychologist, who was at the time Marty Reiser, who was probably the person credited with starting police psychology. And little did I know at the time what an icon he was in his own right. And just things like that I look back on now that have stuck with me. As something at the time, it was just another obstacle to getting on. But looking back on it now, every part of that was formative. Yeah. I'll tell you a story that I will never forget. When I came back out and I was taking the background investigation portion, and I went up to the old Parker Center and wearing a suit and tie, and sat in the hallway on the chair waiting my turn. And two guys come out, and they look like they were out of Central Casting from Jack Webb, and they look like Dragnet guys. And they come out, and they're wearing white shirts and navy blue ties, and they say, "Okay, come on in, McDonnell, come on in." And I come in, and they sit down, and they start messing with me about my application. And where are you from? Where do you live? Where are you staying? And I was staying at some cheap hotel in Hollywood because I didn't know LA and I had no money, and it was on a bus line. And they're giving me a hard time about that, and I'm just going along with the program. And so they said, "Oh, where are you going to stay if you were to get the job?" And I said, "I don't know. That's something I'll have to figure out if I get the offer." And they took it on themselves to start making calls. Wow. And this is something I never thought. And this was Danny Lodolo, a sergeant there at the time, and Sergeant John McGinty.
Oh my gosh!
Yep, John.
McGinty. I do. Yeah. I have a story about John.
And I will never forget those guys. And they ended up finding a room for rent from a police officer couple that was near the academy, and those were the nicest people. Ended up, going through the academy and then getting an apartment with two other academy classmates in Redondo Beach. But the fact that they took it on themselves to go above and beyond and make calls to find some guy they never met before, a place to stay that was close to the academy, to me is something that the little things, it might have been a little thing to them, but they will always be in my mind.
That's amazing.
Coincidentally, sadly, Danny passed, and his wife Mary was active with the family support group, and I got to know her, meet her. And when I ran for sheriff, she reached out and she said, "My son is on the sheriff's department. He's a lieutenant."
Oh my goodness!
And I'm thinking, this is really a small world.
Yes.
And just to be able to look at that family, and they were all tremendous people that I got to meet over the years. It goes back to the idea that the little things are sometimes the most valuable. The things that you don't give a second thought to, something for all of us, stopping to say hello to a little kid, asking them about, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Particularly if you're in uniform, that means so much.
It does.
May never forget that.
Yep.
And that may shape his career choice down the road as well.
It does. It does. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And here I am, and I'm thinking, this is cold Los Angeles. And when I was waiting for my interview, I remember on the street just stopping and talking to some police officer in a black and white, and he had no time for me. He was just, focused on whatever it was he was focused on. But when I got to backgrounds and got this kind of treatment, it really sent a message home to me that every interaction you have, whether you brush it off as no big deal, this is nothing, this is not important, they're all important, because all of us as police officers deal with 10,000 people maybe in our career in some fashion, but the people in the community may deal with a police officer once, and that forever will shape their perceptions of our department, of our profession, and will also actually shape how they vote in regard to the needs of public safety throughout the city, throughout the nation. And so again, going back, not to beat it to death, but the little things become the big things, and if we remember that as we go about our daily activities, and realize that each person we talk to is a big deal and is treated accordingly.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
We do.
We do.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
We were talking to you prior to recording and told you about our interview yesterday, our second time interview with Jimmy Hatch. And when the police were called to his house when he was suicidal, he credits them, those two officers, to his survival and to his success today, because he says they were the two most professional, compassionate people on the department, and they showed up, and in 5 minutes they were talking about baseball.
Yeah.
And that's his words. And so we took that to heart, and we talk about that a lot, how we forget. It's just another call, another military guy that's suicidal. No, they're all different. It's all unique, and you have to treat it, with respect and compassion and all those things that we're taught to do. You have to do it. The John McGinty thing. Oh my God. When you said his name, John McGinty is the person that called me on the phone after I had done all the things that you just talked about, out-of-state testing. We called it the $500 doctor visit, how you had to come back, fly all the way back west. And then John McGinty called me and said, "Is this Jack Schonely?" I said, yes, sir, it is. John McGinty here, do you want to be a Los Angeles police officer? I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He goes, "You start in 2 weeks."
That's what I got. I got 2 weeks too.
Yeah. And he says, can you be here in 2 weeks for on the 14th of November? And I said, "Yes, sir, I will be there." He goes, "All right, we'll be expecting you. You'll get more information." Click. And I hung up the phone and went, I can't move to Los Angeles in 2 weeks. How am I going to do this? And from Pennsylvania. But I did it, and you did it, and a lot of people did it, because you had to do it. That was your goal. And but it's just funny that it's John. And then I got to bump into John again playing soccer for the department a couple times. He was on a team, and I told him about that. He of course didn't remember it because he did that 1,000 times, but I remember it, and you remember it. Right. And like you said, it's those little things that you just take with you. Yeah. Everything, the doctors you met with, all those little things. That's a long time ago, but yet it's vivid, isn't it? I stayed in a hotel in Rampart.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I look back on where I stayed and I went, oh my gosh, I can't believe I stayed there for my doctor visit. I cringe.
I had been back. I remembered the address of where I had stayed for the 2-week period or whatever it was. And I was back there on radio calls, once for a shooting, 2 other times for a stabbing. And I just think to myself, you know what? God was looking out for me, because it could have been a different story on so many different occasions.
My gosh, that's incredible. Yeah. That's incredible.
I did the same thing in San Diego. I stayed in a Fleabag hotel across the street from the sports arena off of Rosecrans in San Diego. As I was going through the process, and I look back, I'm like, holy cow, there's strip clubs lining every street down there. There's homeless people everywhere, drug deals going on in broad daylight, like bad, and there I was.
Ignorance is bliss, man. We didn't know. We're just youngsters trying to get a job with no money. With no money. Yeah. You have no money. You got to find something cheap, and you just this is close to the police station where I'm got to be. I guess this is cool. Yeah. And it looked okay, but ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Then months later, you get a year later, you look back and go, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that was not smart at all. But a lot of us did it. So
exactly. Well, look, before we lose the thread, talking about the little things and how much they matter. Yeah. When you try and define leadership is viewed by many as something grandiose. Somebody, a general in battle, and the ability and the opportunity to be able to do great things. But leadership is really, whatever opportunity you're given to do the little things which add up to the big things. You may have something, come your way that is highly publicized and you're recognized for leadership in some circumstance. But leadership is the day-to-day, is dealing with the people. It's a people business, dealing with people in a way that's respectful, that's motivational, that's respectful of who they are and what they bring to the table, and to show gratitude to them for what they do. None of us know what's going on in our people's lives truly, and what obstacles are in the way, or what challenges they're dealing with at home, whether it's aging parents or sick kids or relationship issues or so many other things that can go on in a person's life. And they come to work, and you like to think you can leave that stuff at home. You can't. It's part of you. You're carrying it around, and you're dealing with it however you do. And to look out for each other and our partners, and beyond our partners, others out there, when something doesn't seem right and they're not their usual self, to be able to have the relationship ahead of time where you can say, hey, let's have a cup of coffee and talk, and I didn't have the opportunity to see your podcast yet from yesterday, but it sounds like the kind of things that happened in that with Jimmy Hatch happen potentially on a daily basis with public safety professionals as well, where when you think about it, we send our military folks, and God bless them, into war zones, into combat, and they stay there for a period of time, 10 months usually, and then they're brought back, and they may be redeployed over and over again, particularly special missions units. But when you look at how we deal with cops, with firefighters, with EMS personnel, we put them, once they get on the job and get out of the academy and get into the field and basically through their probation and beyond, they're out there and they're rolling on highly traumatic events over and over and over again. The volume is different in different places, but the behavior and activity is the same pretty much everywhere. And so whether, you're going to 10 runs a day or you're going to 1 a week, it's still traumatic. And somebody in the public arena, somebody who's not a public safety professional, if they see something happen in a traffic collision in front of them on the street and they stop to help, or they see a shooting, or the victim of a stabbing, that's something they never forget. That's something that is traumatizing to a person. And if you care about people, you can understand that. But cops, we put in that situation, and firefighters and EMS, and that's all they do pretty much. They go from call to call to call, dealing with chronic trauma, chronic exposure to trauma over a long period of time, whether we deny it or not. And we try and oftentimes use humor as something to deflect it. But you carry that with you. That becomes part of your baggage, another brick in the knapsack, as they say. And you go through life with that, and it is affecting you, whether you realize it or not. Yeah. And we don't do enough, or we haven't traditionally done enough. I'm very thankful that the focus we've seen in recent years on mental health for first responders is getting some attention now. Corporate America, I have the opportunity to work with AT&T on one of their committees looking at public first responder mental health issues, wellness issues overall. And they've dedicated a lot of resources to giving back and to try and be helpful in that regard.
That's awesome.
And I just think that, we think tactics all the time, and that tactics include then physical fitness, physical well-being, but we've never really given enough attention to the mental health part, mental well-being, because we're all human beings and we see stuff, and whether we acknowledge that bothered us or not, it does. And you
sure it does.
Compartmentalize it, but you still take it on board. And unless we do something to deal with that over the course of a career, you're going to end up with a very heavy knapsack that is very difficult to deal with. And you will not be what you could have been because you're carrying that load.
We dedicate a bunch of shows now to mental health. The one that we recorded yesterday with Jimmy and Al Mack, they were both prior guests, but we brought them back just to talk about mental health. We just had Dr. Tanya Glenn. That episode just came out. She deals with post-traumatic stress disorder 100% of her day, every day for 30 years, and treating first responders in the military. So we take that really, really seriously, and I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah.
It's an important thing that we certainly in our times early on didn't get training in that, what to expect in that. But it has improved, certainly, but it's got to get even better. There's no doubt.
The stigma that was attached to trying to seek help back 30, 40 years ago, I don't think that's there the way it was now at all. It's a different ballgame today, and people have an expectation. A new generation of first responders have expectations that if they need help, they're going to ask for it and they're going to get it. Yeah, we didn't have that, sadly, and that was not the culture of the organizations at that time. It was basically, rub dirt on it, walk it off, and get back in the radio car.
Just suck it up, deal with it. It's part of the job. Yeah. And if you can't deal with it, maybe you need to find another profession. It's like, whoa, you think back on that, and think about how many people that hurt. That attitude hurt a lot, thousands, tens of thousands over the years.
Yeah, and we all became part of that culture because that was the environment we operated in.
Yeah,
and thankfully we've evolved from that. And I think back to the name I mentioned, Dr. Marty Reiser, being one of the, if not the father of police psychology, certainly one of them, and the contributions that they made, and they were kind of looked down upon, if you will, because we don't need that here. That's take that stuff somewhere else. We can handle our own mission, and very short-sighted. But people like him, doctors like him, had the had the, I think, overarching vision that what we just talked about is that chronic exposure to trauma, severe trauma, has an impact on your performance and your health and wellness.
I think you see the fallout from what you're describing in law enforcement, first responders' personal lives. Look at fire, police, EMS. The divorce rates are astonishing,
right?
And that's a fallout from what you're describing. And I will say, I do feel like it's getting better. You look at the personal lives of the folks that are on the job now, and you don't see 3 divorces in each. And then I remember as a new police officer, the saying was, "You're not a real police officer until you've been divorced 3 times." And that's a sad saying. Yeah. And thank the Lord that didn't happen. I've happily married and have the same wife, and I know a lot of other folks that are in the same position as me. So I think that's evidence that some of these situations we're describing are starting to change. The culture's changing. The stigma is going away. But it's refreshing to hear a leader like you talk about it. Yeah. It's obviously something that you've thought about over the years, and the culture that you're shaping in a leadership position is helping to reduce that stigma. So thank you for doing that.
Back up a little bit, and I got a couple questions about your Boston internship with Chief Bratton. What did you do? I mean, what did you do with Chief Bratton? And I think it was another lieutenant. He was then a lieutenant.
Sweeney.
Sweeney. What did you do with them? And are there things that you learned then that you can look back to that internship and say, wow, I am still using those today?
Yeah. At the time, I thought this was not what I signed up for. I was thinking it would be more get out there on ride-alongs and do cop stuff, and it was none of that really. Some of that, but not much of that. It was more admin stuff in support of putting on community meetings and doing things that a young person wanting to get into policing wasn't excited about. The cops at the time were not excited about it, and it wasn't until later that I looked back on it and think and thought about it and realized that this was the precursor program that became community policing down the road. And the community meetings and listening, big thing to community groups. That was not something that was done much at the time. It was community policing in the eyes of cops back in the 60s and 70s and 80s was, we'll have a meeting and we'll tell you what your problems are and what we're going to do about them. And it was not getting together with the community to find out what the community identified problems were. We'd go to a meeting and tell the community, you got a robbery problem. You've had 6 robberies on this block in the last week and a half, and we're working it for you. And the people at the meeting, they didn't know there was any robberies on the block. And that was not in their mind a big deal. What was a big deal is there was a group of kids hanging outside the corner convenience store, and they were afraid to send their kids to get milk or to get bread because of these kids hanging out front. Meanwhile, the police cars would drive by there 20 times a day and not do anything because they didn't see it as a problem. Just a bunch of kids hanging out because they had nowhere else to go. So that lack of communication, frustration on the part of the community that the police don't do anything about our issues. And from the police perspective, why are the community not supportive? We're out there, we're tracking down robbers who are preying on the community. And so that disconnect in just a communication piece could have been rectified very easily by talking.
Yeah.
And so I think
two-way communication instead of one way.
Exactly. And then focusing on, as we talked about in greater detail in community policing, focusing on the underlying causes of dysfunction, of crime, of incidents, of if you have a series of robberies, why are they coming back there? What are we doing about it? What are the underlying causative factors? And dealing with them, not just the symptoms. And traditionally, we would deal with the symptoms. And you look at what we now look at as multiple calls for service locations. How many times a month are we sending a police response to this particular address? And in some cases, it's 30, 40, 50 times a month. Well, let's figure out why. That's a tremendous drain on resources that can't be deployed elsewhere. Why do they keep coming back to this location? And what can we do about addressing that? So out of that internship, I think my takeaway was kind of getting a bigger picture perspective of policing at the time. It wasn't the granular, gritty radio call response, but more so the community, the management of the police organization, the politics of a police organization. My takeaway, although I didn't appreciate it at the time, it was very, very valuable down the road.
Wow. That's really neat. That you can look back on that and say, wow, that thing is still here today. Incredible foresight, I must say, by Boston to have that, because there's places in the country today that don't do that, all these years later, and they were way ahead of the curve there. And of course, when you became a Los Angeles police officer and you became a supervisor and went up the chain, that came back over and over and over again to where you had some experience in that.
Thank you to our sponsor, Canyon Aero Connect. Canyon Aero Connect has been a trusted leader in airborne law enforcement communication since Paul Wolfsburg introduced the first flight phone in 1970. While our name has evolved, our commitment to innovation and quality remains strong. Contact us today at canyonAeroConnect.com to explore our latest mission-critical solutions.
Everything old is new again, the old saying. And that's so often the case, that people who came before us dealt with issues, and a lot of good came from the way they dealt with them, but may have been, pushed aside for any number of reasons. It could be lack of personnel. It could be new leadership that comes in and wants to put their own stamp on something. So everything that the guy before me did is no longer relevant. You have a lot of those types of things that happen in any political environment. And so looking at what we did throughout history, I think we learn an awful lot on missed opportunities, on things that were done but not all the way, that if we were to re-energize those and deal with them maybe a little bit differently, you've already got the bones of a great response to whatever the problem is, and not have to reinvent things. Too often, I think we start over too much rather than drawing on what our predecessors had done fairly successfully, but weren't able to take it to the level it needed to go ultimately for whatever reason.
And there's something you brought up that I just want to touch on briefly, because I found it amusing as well during my career. When I was doing graffiti investigations, I was assigned to the community policing division because that was a major concern of the community at the time, was graffiti. So we would get a monthly report from city council on the top concerns that came up during city council meetings. And like you, we always thought, it's got to be, homicides, robberies, these major crimes that are taking place in the city. But the two top concerns that always shocked me, number one and number two, number one was street vendors, people selling stuff illegally, whether it was food or flowers or whatever the thing was. That was usually the number one concern. And it always shocked me, and graffiti was number two. And that shocked me as well. All these other crimes that affect the welfare of a community, seemingly major to me and to my colleagues, was not even the top 10. And it was so wild to hear that. So it's interesting. And I like what you brought up about addressing the root causes of some of these things, because like you said, a lot of those are symptoms of a much bigger problem. So it just interesting, that the community sees it in that way.
Yeah. Well, everybody's exposed to quality of life issues, blight, neighborhood blight, graffiti being an example of that, trash in the streets, encampments with tents and all of the things, abandoned cars, burned cars, those kind of things. Those are all things that everybody's exposed to in that community. So everybody sees that as important. Whereas the individual incidents of crime, a limited number of people are exposed to those. And others may not even have an awareness of those incidents, but everybody does see the other stuff.
So fast forward again, you get the letter from McGinty and you load up your car, I imagine, and no car. So what did you do? You flew to Los Angeles?
Yeah, I flew to Los Angeles. I had 2 suitcases and a gym bag. I got off the plane at LAX and took the flyaway bus to Hollywood. I found through Foder's Guide to Los Angeles a place that I could afford right off the boulevard, and it was a dump. And I walked 11 or 12 blocks down and checked in there and just shaking my head, thinking, what have I done? It would have been easy probably just to pack up and go home and say, no, it's not me. But I didn't do that. I stayed the course. And again, as they teach us all, don't give up. Keep pushing through for something you want, even though it's uncomfortable or hard. And I did that, and thankfully it worked out.
how did you get to Elysian Park on your start date?
When I got the apartment that they had, or the room that they had set up, somebody else knew somebody who was an off-duty detective from Foothill who worked at a car dealership off-duty. And so I knew a guy who knew a guy, and I ended up getting a loan from the credit union, the LAPD credit union, because I had no resources, and was able to get a car loan once I was accepted to the academy, and then enough money to buy the things I needed for the academy. And so it was everything came together, and things we take for granted if you don't need them. When you need them and they're there, what a resource. And it's a game changer, because without their help, I would have been on a plane back and never would have been out here for my full career.
Yeah, we wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Yeah, I think,
you wouldn't be on the Hangar Z podcast. Oh my gosh. Life-changing, Jim. Life-changing stuff.
Yeah. So I just look at that again, though, and going back to the little things, that every one of those little things was a big thing in my life, and my ability to be able to stay the course and end up doing what I was able to do.
Yeah. What class were you in, Jim?
681.
681. 681. Yeah. Wow. Oh my goodness. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I do remember too that the credit union came in the first day, I believe, when we were in the academy, and said, "Hey, we can loan you this much," and it was enough to get you the uniforms and the stuff that we needed. But that was a big deal at the time. You looked at that and went, "Oh, I couldn't even bought this uniform. I had no money either." I mean, wow. Thank goodness.
Yes,
persevered.
You as well.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm thrilled that kept with it. And survived my hotel stays. Anything from the academy that you remember that jumps out at you? I mean, I know there's a lot of things. But things there. I think back to mine, and I can pick 2 or 3 things where it was like it happened yesterday, and it's vivid, and I learned something, or it was funny, or it was just something that, wow, I didn't know that, and I was shocked. And anything like that happen to you?
It was a lot of lessons learned there. There was, we became a team. We started off with 93 recruits the first day. And when we graduated 34.
Yeah.
And, the academy was seen in those days as part of the deselection process. If they didn't feel you deserved to be here, you wouldn't be there. And so you had to work every day just to stay in the class and be part of the graduating class. And it was a 6-month academy. Tremendous attrition. Today we would look at that and just, say that's not acceptable, those kind of rates of attrition. Either it was the selection for the academy was not done well enough, or the academy was focused not on training, but on deselection.
Deselecting, right.
And it may have been a combination of those things back in the day, but there was no shortage of people who wanted to be police officers in those days. So that the pressure wasn't there that's there today to take every recruit that is qualified and be able to hopefully get them ready to be on the street and to make them successful.
Yeah,
it is very big a challenge today.
Yeah.
You talked about recruitment, and I want to touch on this before we get too far away from your conversation about being a child in Boston. There's not many cities I like. I'm not a city guy. My 2 favorite cities are San Diego and Boston. I had a chance to visit Boston. I think it was 2008. I was a new police officer. And I remember seeing some Boston police officers in uniform walking around the downtown area. And I was really impressed with their appearance. I think about some of the subconscious influences you have as a young man, seeing someone in uniform that's impressive. And I think subconsciously that does something to you. And you see something like that, you're like, I admire that person, the way they present themselves.
Right.
And then you have the benefit of that command presence when you're in uniform, working, maintaining that command presence over the suspects. So there's a lot of different benefits of looking sharp. But when you look at recruitment and those subconscious influences, I always thought it was important to be presentable for the general public, because you never know who's looking at you and how you're going to influence that person and their later life decisions. When you look back on your childhood, do you remember seeing that in your community, and maybe did that have some sort of a subconscious influence in your decision to pursue law enforcement?
Where I lived in the city, Boston is very rich with hospitals, and I lived 100 yards or less from a fire station. I lived within a mile of probably 6 different hospitals. So it was constant sirens coming and going, and that kind of a tone. And so we would regularly see first responders in the performance of their duty. And I think that had an impact on me, just as far as, how hard they worked to get people help when they needed help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that impressed me. It's something that was kind of above and beyond what was expected of somebody else in the community. They were held to a different standard. Obviously didn't always meet those standards, and always a work in progress. But certainly, I do think that had an impact on me, just watching people in the performance of their duty and how they looked, how they presented themselves, and attitude, a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I look at that today. I'm a stickler for uniform appearance, maybe to the ire of some. But to me, that's part of the tactical package. When
Yes.
you get out of a police car and you are squared away and your uniform is clean and pressed and you're in good physical condition and you're very competent with your tools and your ability to be able to communicate, as you come and talk to someone, that's going to impact their decision making as to what their response will be toward you.
Yep.
And I've talked to many people who have said, I was going to fight with the cops, but I realized that it wouldn't have gone well, and I didn't do that. And if you can do things non-verbally that affect in a positive way the outcome of the interaction, then that's a great tactical tool that needs to be used as much as we can use it. And then just the professionalism that I look at LA as probably the best in the country as far as how the LA area, Southern California, how police officers look and present themselves overall. The attention that is paid to uniform appearance, to physical appearance, you don't see that the same way in other cities across America, with some exceptions. And I'm very proud of that. I think we need to work hard to maintain that. I think it's easy to try and do things to improve morale that allow people not to maintain that uniform appearance. And we need to hold the line on certain things, even though they may not be as comfortable to wear as, the wool uniform as something else might be. They send a different message than some other more comfortable options might send.
Yes.
And so I think we need to be attuned to that. We need to get input from others on that, and not just make changes for the sake of making changes, but rather look very closely as, what does the uniform say about us? It's how people perceive us. It's how they look at one officer and differentiate their department from another department. We don't all wear the same patches. LA doesn't wear patches. And the old story on that is LAPD doesn't wear patches. Why is that? You know who we are.
That's right.
When I first heard that, I laughed.
Me too.
I got a great kick out of that. But your uniform speaks volumes about how squared away you are, and how the person can expect to be treated. And if you take care of your tools and your appearance and all of the things that go along with how you present yourself to the public, they're going to feel more confident in your ability to be able to provide the service they've called you out there for. And I would say as well, within the organization, as young officers, we all look to peer leaders to see, how do you do things? And that includes uniform appearance. And, I can look back on my years growing up in LAPD, and that everybody would sit and roll call with a towel and some polish and shine their badge while they're listening to the presentation, and then put it on and go out there, and their equipment was spit shined. Yeah. And they took great pride in that.
And every Friday, Jim, every Friday, right? Inspection. Yeah. Yep. You stood in a line at that, the roll call's over, and they go line up for inspection. That was almost every Friday.
Right.
Back in the day. I don't know if that still occurs. I hope it does. And sometimes as a young cop, I bet you can agree with this. It was an annoyance, kind of, geez, another inspection. But looking back, we're older and wiser. That was one of the smartest things the department did, because most people, what I found is that most people kept that standard because it was just that was the expectation by your peers and by your supervisors. And it wasn't a big deal on a Friday to stand there. You could have done it Thursday, but there were a few that needed that extra push, and the inspection is what kept them in line, So it covered everybody. It covered the people that do it. It covered the people that maybe let things go a little bit. But that professionalism, I've told many stories over the years about criminals that say, it was the appearance of the officer, and that's why this didn't go differently. And you go, appearance? Yes, it's important. Shine shoes, leather gear, fitness, uniform pressed. It just shows confidence, and it shows professionalism, and it shows, hey, this isn't my first rodeo, and this isn't a part-time gig. This is my career, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to handle this. And people just go, whoa, there is an element that looks at that. I'm so glad that came up, because I
think it showed you care. Yeah.
Yes, it does show you care. You care about your department, your profession, yourself. I remember my mom years ago. She came to LA every year. My mom and dad would come out, and over the years, she had contact with a lot of Los Angeles police officers, and she'd see them in uniform. She'd see them off duty. She'd see them. And I remember her saying to me one day, "Are there any fat officers on Los Angeles Police Department?" I go, "Oh yeah, there are, but they're few and far between." And she goes, "That's amazing." I mean, she noticed that. And it was true at the time. It was very true. And I said, well, that's because there's a pride there and there's a necessity, because that you're going to be in altercations, whether you like it or not. You're going to be in altercations. You want to survive. Yeah. You want to be there for your partner, all the things that we're talking about. But
they took Fridays off.
That's right. And there were people that did that too.
Yeah,
there's people that did that. Yeah. And in there, it was about monthly, there was a gun inspection too, or a driver's license inspection, or, and at the time it seemed like, oh, geez, well, this is kind of silly.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Yeah. No, it was great. It was part of the tradition of the department, and for a good reason. Wow. So you get out of the academy. Give us the thumbnail. I know it's hard to do because you were on the department a long time, but give us the a quick sequence of events of places you worked, promotions, jobs, and then we'll talk about some of those jobs specifically.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Yeah, looking back, when I left the academy, they sent a handful of us to West LA Division. We started there. To me, it was all new territory. I didn't know where I was going, one division versus another, but quickly learned it. Remember some of the training officers I had, and we'd be out there at 2:00 in the morning, and they'd turn all the lights off, shoot down an alley, turn the lights and siren on. Where am I? I'm shot. Where are we? Where are we? Yeah. And, it really drove home the importance of being able to identify exactly where you were in case you needed help. And doing that early put that in my mind as a necessity very quickly. You'd heard it in the academy, but it drove it home.
And West LA, for those that don't know, a very large division. As I recall, it's probably 55, 60 square miles.
64, yeah.
Yeah, and it's huge. And learning that division is one of the hardest divisions in the city to learn. I would say it's so big.
Yeah, it was good. That was a good experience there. Some great people I got to work with, and then, work patrol, work special problems units, and then left there and went to Harbor Division, which was Wilmington, Harbor City, San Pedro. And again, that was a good division at the time, a division that was quite a bit of gang activity going on. I learned a lot there. And then from there went to West Bureau Crash, which was the gang unit on the west side of the city that served Wilshire, Hollywood, West LA, and Pacific, Venice area. And again, that was a great job. I thoroughly enjoyed that. We felt like we were doing good, trying to drive violent crime down, which was driven primarily by gangs at the time. It still is. And from there, made detective, went to Organized Crime Intelligence Division, spent a year there. And the pace was, honestly, I enjoyed the work and the people, but the pace was not something that I was ready for at that stage in my career. I had worked homicide as part of the West Bureau Crash experience. And so once I had my year in, I applied and was accepted into the 77th Street Homicide Division and or unit, and went there. That was late 87, 88. And then in just an 11 square mile area in 1987, 77th had 160 homicides.
Holy cow.
It was horrendous.
Yeah. I've got the belt buckle right here in my shadow box from that year. That was wild. That was a wild year.
It really was.
Wow. It was incredible there.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is Chief. Visit contest.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the buzzword.
And, we talk about the increase in violent crime, which is regrettable because we know what to do to be able to put a lid on that. But looking back on those days, the homicide rate was 4 or 5 times what it is today.
Yeah.
And I hope we never get back to those levels because it was horrendous. But a lot learned from that. Having worked that division, that was one of the jobs that I look back and remember fondly and value the most. It was one of the hardest jobs because you were on call, and in a weekend you might pick up 4 crime scenes, 4 homicides, and you didn't sleep at all.
Yeah,
during that whole time I worked there.
Some of the best street cops and detectives,
absolutely,
the department's ever had worked 77th in the 80s, and it was just wow. That's our first contact. I was a patrol officer. You're coming out to the homicide scenes that I was putting flares up at. That was a busy place.
Yeah.
But you just learned so much so quickly.
Yeah.
That benefited you down the road. I know I did, and I know you did. But
yeah. Then I took the sergeant test. I figured I had taken the detective test, and so the additional study would maybe be helpful, and I'll take the sergeant test and maybe get dual status and do sergeant for a year and come back and be a detective. So I took it and I made sergeant, went to Southeast right next door, worked patrol there and then vice after that. And again, some of the best experiences, working very busy division, very violent division at the time, but one where you feel you were truly helping good people who were just trying to get by and just trying to raise a family and do the best they could for their family.
I agree.
From there, went down. I figured it was time to get a staff job and get some administrative experience. Went into the Parker Center headquarters out of the chief's office, inspection and control section, where we did audits of internal affairs, audits of narcotics, audits of things for the chief of staff, for the chief of police. And that was, again, an experience that gave me a much bigger perspective on the department, on what was important, how things needed to be done, maintaining integrity of investigations, ensuring that that things were being done right for all the right reasons, and that we didn't, let standards down and then have to worry about corruption issues. It was a very good learning experience for me and kind of a broad-based perspective. From there, I went to Hollenbeck on the east side of the city as a lieutenant, and spent some time there as a watch commander and a brief time as the detective lieutenant. And I had been pulled out to do an investigation for the chief on work environment that was present in 3 divisions around the city relative to how people were being treated. And that while looking back on it, it lasted maybe 9 months. I really had a lot of insight as a result of that. we interviewed probably 300 people in the 3 divisions and got a perspective from people that believed that they had been wronged at some point in their career, and how impactful that was for them. And in many cases, how damaging that was for them as they progressed through the department. And that 20 years later, in some cases, they were talking about things as if they happened yesterday. And they were still very, very, very sensitive and very important to them. And so, again, going back to the little things, that had somebody taken the time during the time that this was occurring and spent some time just talking, debriefing it, saying, what happened, and if for somebody who's been given days off, suspension for something that they did, to take the time when they come back to make them whole before we put them back out again, and to put in perspective what they've been through. Because someone who's been through discipline feels like everybody in the department knows that what they went through. People don't know. People are living their own lives, working hard, doing what they're doing. But that's not how the individual feels. So to take the time to bring them back and set them up for success when they come back, give them a win and let them move forward with their head high, and whatever happened, you paid for it, move on and be productive and show people who you really are. And if we did more of that, I think we would have a better ability to be able to help people deal with some of the things that they deal with throughout their career that are hard to deal with. And while we talked earlier about chronic trauma, exposure to violence, exposure to so many different things that are heart-rendering in some cases, dealing with kids who've been exposed to violence or tragic traffic accidents, those things that you remember forever, you compartmentalize them as best you can. But the other things, the internal things, cause more stress for people than the chronic violence do. For a police officer to go down an alley after a man with a gun at 3 a.m., you do that without even thinking about it. You do it because that's your job. You've done it so many times before. But the things, being involved in discipline, being interviewed by internal affairs, going through those types of things are more stressful in many cases than the things that most people would assume would cause the greatest stress. Having an open complaint for a year, you're on eggshells for that whole year. And, the importance of getting these investigations done, bringing them to closure, giving the individual who's involved some closure and support throughout that period as well. Critically important to them maintaining their mental health, their good attitude, them being able to stay positive in the long term when they do come back to work. When you look about at the amount of discipline that we have in the department and how many people will actually be terminated for their discipline, it's a very small number. Yeah. But a lot of people will be impacted as involved and potentially involved in something that may or may not pan out to be true. But while they're going through that period, they're in a state of high anxiety. They don't feel well. They're not operating the way they would normally operate. And we need to see that, realize it, and give them the support, appropriate support to be able to navigate those waters.
Yeah, I'm thinking of names right now. Rampart being the Rampart scandal being one where there was a lot of people that were, at home for a long time,
right?
And they had nothing to do with any of it, and yet they were at home for a long time, and they ended up bouncing back and being in very specialized units, and but the scar was there. I remember talking to one where there was tears in his eyes talking about it, and he's one of the most successful guys I know in the department, but he went through that, and it scarred him forever, personally, emotionally. So that was an important topic to look into, and change came out of that for the best. Yeah. Where'd you go from there?
Community policing group. Yeah. And going back full circle to the internship I had done, that was 94. The Clinton crime bill had dedicated dollars to be able to hire an additional 100,000 cops in police agencies across the country and to upgrade the computer systems throughout the country. And we were in bad shape on both cases at LAPD. But we took the benefits of what LAPD had instituted back in the 60s with the basic car plan. We took that, built on that. That was Ed Davis as chief, really very forward thinking, very, very much focused on the needs of the community, getting their priorities straight, looking at the underlying causes, and then being responsive to what the needs of the community were. We tried to institutionalize that throughout the department through the period of 94, 95, 96. And then as time went on, unfortunately, all of the benefits gained from that, or many of the benefits gained from that increased cooperation and collaboration between police and community, tremendous successes. Well, when 9/11 hit, then we refocused and didn't include as much as we should have community policing on the efforts toward counterterrorism. And so we almost pushed aside one model, the community policing model, to enter into the intelligence-led policing model, to the exclusion of the gains we had made before. A lot of personnel were pulled off from patrol and other places to be able to stand up a fairly aggressive counterterrorism capability. We were able to do a lot with few, looking at other cities, New York in particular, who had the model for a counterterrorism effort because they had been, the foundation of 9/11 impacts. So they had a very, very robust counterterrorism effort, but they also have a lot of police officers. At the time, I think they had 41,000 police officers deployed, whereas LAPD at its height has 10,000.
Yeah.
And today their numbers are, I think, 900. So 1,200 below what would be their regular deployment. And then an additional 650 off long-term injured and sick. It's really tight right now, very difficult. But we still have to look at not what we don't have, but what we do have. And how do we make the best of the resources we have available to us? And in some cases, that might mean we have to reframe the way we look at our business. We have to see, okay, let's reprioritize things. What do we have to do? What are we no longer able to do, or at least able to do the way we did before? And how do we move forward supporting our people, ensuring their safety, and serving the community as best we can, given the resource constraints that we currently face? And that's a big challenge for police administrators, leaders across the country right now. Chicago, who's going to host next month, who's going to host the Democratic National Convention, they're 2,000 cops down in their deployment. And so the demands don't decrease. The number of people available to be able to address those demands have dramatically decreased. And so that's going to take some creativity, some innovation on how do we provide the best services we can with what we have to work with.
And Chicago's got enough issues on a daily basis. I mean, we're recording this at the end of July 4th weekend, and I just read 100 shootings, 17 dead, like 87 hit by gunfire in a weekend. And they're down 2,000 officers. And we wonder why it's staying like that. I mean, when you're down 2,000,
yep.
It's incredible that it's not worse in some way. Sometimes I think about that and go, well, when you're down 2,000 officers, of course it's going to be like that, but it's amazing it's not worse.
Yeah. It's we're in a tough place in America right now relative to policing, but I think it's a time of great opportunity as well, because it's a chance for us to be able to, I think the police profession has been humbled in the last couple of years. Which if we turn that into a positive as we move forward, I think we can capitalize on that as far as refocusing on values, refocusing on what's important, making sure the appropriate guardrails are in place so that our behavior is what the public expects it to be, what all of us as professionals expect it to be. But also then I think the public is starting to see that the moves that have been put in place post-2020 were not effective, were not something that ended up with desirable results for communities, particularly the more challenged communities across our nation. And so I think as we move forward with the recent realization that things have to change, things have to be made better than they are, but going back again to lessons learned in the past and not throwing out one model when we adopt another, that we can't do it on our own. We can't possibly do it. We have to work collaboratively with our public safety partners, but we have to work with the communities that we serve, because without community support, we can't possibly be effective. But with community support, we can do a tremendous amount with even with limited resources.
Where did you go from there?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thank you to our sponsor, Canyon Aero Connect. Canyon Aero Connect has been a trusted leader in airborne law enforcement communication since Paul Wolfsburg introduced the first flight phone in 1970. While our name has evolved, our commitment to innovation and quality remains strong. Contact us today at canyonaeroconnect.com to explore our latest mission-critical solutions.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Thank you for joining us on the Hangar Z Podcast and for supporting the sponsors who make these conversations possible. This is the first recording that will be part of an ongoing series on leadership. We feel that this conversation is vital because effective leadership serves as the foundation for successful operations within law enforcement, particularly in specialized fields like aviation. Leadership development is crucial in fostering a culture of accountability, resilience, and innovation, which are essential in navigating the complex challenges faced by law enforcement and public safety aviation today. By exploring various perspectives and insights from experienced and effective leaders like Jim McDonnell, we aim to highlight the significance of empowering and motivating current and future leaders with the tools and knowledge they need to support their teams effectively. The conversations on leadership not only emphasizes the necessity of effective leadership, but also underscores the critical impact that well-developed leaders can have on officer well-being, community relations, and overall mission success. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of leadership, we hope to inspire and equip listeners with actionable strategies that can lead to meaningful change within their organizations and the communities they serve.